In Chinese history, there was a crime where all you had to do was write a few words, and you could die for it.
During the reign of Emperor Yongzheng in the Qing dynasty, an official set an imperial examination question. The phrase he chose was Wei Min Suo Ji, a perfectly ordinary quotation from the Book of Songs. But someone filed a report. They claimed that two of the characters, when parts of them were removed, resembled the characters in the emperor's name without their tops. In other words, a hidden message calling for the emperor to be beheaded. The official was executed. He had not resisted. He had no conspiracy. He was selecting talent for the emperor. But the four characters he wrote were reinterpreted into a meaning he had never imagined. Conviction did not depend on what you intended to say. It depended on how others chose to interpret your words, and the power of interpretation belonged entirely to those in power. In the early Qing dynasty, a merchant funded the compilation of a history of the Ming dynasty. The book used Ming-era reign titles instead of Qing ones. Over 1,000 people were implicated. The writers, the editors, the woodblock carvers, the printers, the booksellers, even people who simply bought a copy. All of them were investigated. More than 70 were executed. One book, from author to reader, everyone along the chain was swept up. The message was clear. Even touching a book could become a crime. When punishment spreads this far, fear no longer belongs to those who write. It belongs to everyone who can read.
So, what kind of crime punishes you? Not for what you did, but for what someone else thinks your words meant.
Behind both of these cases is the same charge, the literary Inquisition. In Chinese history, you could be executed for writing a few words, not because you rebelled, but because someone decided your words contained disrespect. The question is not how cruel it was. The question is, why would an empire with supreme imperial authority be afraid of a piece of writing? The literary Inquisition was not unique to the Qing dynasty, but the Qing took it to its extreme. Under the Kangxi, Yongzheng, and Qianlong emperors, more than 2,000 cases were recorded. Why the Qing? Because the Qing was a minority regime, fewer than 2 million Manchus, ruling over more than 100 million Han Chinese. In traditional Chinese thinking, the Manchus had once been considered barbarians. Any text comparing the Ming and the Qing, any phrase that could be read as belittling the Manchus, touched the most sensitive nerve. This sensitivity was not a personality trait. It was structural insecurity. When your legitimacy is already fragile, any single word can be seen as a threat. But the true power of the literary Inquisition was not in how many people it killed. Killing was the method, not the purpose. The real purpose was to create an atmosphere, to make every person think. Before writing every word, could this character be misread? Could this sentence be reported? When everyone is censoring themselves, the emperor doesn't need to censor anyone. You don't need to ban speech. You just need to make sure nobody knows what is safe to say. The vaguer the rules, the greater the fear. The greater the fear, the more complete the self-censorship. Violence can only destroy words that have already been spoken. Fear can destroy thoughts that have not yet been formed. The deepest impact of this fear was not silence. It was redirection. The brightest minds of the Qing era collectively turned to a safe field, textual criticism. They stopped discussing reality. They stopped commenting on politics. Instead, they buried themselves in studying ancient scripts, collating old texts, and verifying historical details. This work had scholarly value, but it became the mainstream. Not because people suddenly loved the ancient world, but because it was the only kind of scholarship that wouldn't get you killed. When a society's smartest spend all their energy studying how a character was written 2,000 years ago, instead of thinking about the problems of today, that society's intellectual resources have been quietly redirected. When language becomes dangerous, people do not stop talking. They start talking differently, more indirectly, more obliquely, more carefully. The Chinese cultural tradition of reading between the lines, of saying just enough and no more, is deeply connected to this history.
Centuries have passed. The emperors are gone. But that pause, that moment of hesitation before you speak, that never went away.
Looking back today, the literary Inquisition seems like an absurd relic of the ancient world executing someone, because a few strokes of a character could be rearranged into an insult. It sounds unthinkable, but the logic behind it did not disappear with the end of imperial rule. When expression carries a cost, people calculate whether that cost is worth paying. When calculation becomes habit, silence no longer needs to be ordered. In certain corners of the world, even today, people pause before sending a message, not to choose better words, but to weigh the risk. That pause may be the deepest trace left behind by a fear that began centuries ago.